everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to go over this email sent to me by Dan Dibble, otherwise known as D2. Subject line, President Nelson, quote, only two things left before second coming, end quote. He says, at State Conference, June 11th, 2023, Elder Treadway of the 70 said President Nelson told him there are only two things left that need to happen before the second coming. One, the gathering of Israel, and two, Jesus comes. And he says, we got a good laugh from the second item. Our prophet can be so funny. Elder Treadway wasn't more specific, but implied everything else has been fulfilled. This explains the emphasis on the gathering. I just thought I would pass on more second coming comments from the prophet from someone that heard it firsthand. Keep up the great work. I appreciate your shorter videos. Dan Dibble. Thank you, Dan. Now, of course, we have to take this with a grain of salt, but Dan, I believe you. Why? Because it fits in with everything else that we've studied on the channel. Things that have been openly said in General Conference and other places. It's not, it doesn't really go against that. In fact, it goes along with that. So, this is a very interesting thing, and I feel like I've heard something similar to this before. I wish I could remember what it was. But you might be like, well, no, there, when I started this channel, I would always just incessantly get comments saying, no, I think you're getting too excited. There's just way too much that has to happen first. There's just way too much. And so I've devoted a good amount of time on this channel trying to figure out what that was. What are those things that have to happen that's causing it so that we're not even close to the second coming because way too much has to happen. And I know the sources where these ideas come from. And so I investigated it, and I've put together spreadsheets and quotes, and I continue to do so. And what I've come to realize is that there's some people that'll say that, the second coming, it's really complicated. It's really deep. You really have to understand the prophecies, and you have to read the scriptures very carefully in a very specific way to even try and understand the second coming. You have to go to the Apocrypha. You have to look at the book, all these different things, these apocryphal texts, and learn from the experts. Nope. No, you don't. No, you don't. And the second coming is not that complicated. Neither are the signs of the times. First of all, let's just do a logical assessment of this. Do you think that the Lord would make such a big event, something that you are supposed to prepare for? Do you think that he's going to make it so that you have to rely on experts or self-styled experts to understand what to look for the second coming? Do you think that he's made it so complicated that you have to put together special hidden codes from the scriptures, special numbers, and stuff like that, and then you'll understand? Let me give you an example. And I've gone over this before. In fact, there was a video where we went over this entire talk. This is April 2004. A talk by, at the time, Elder Dallin H. Oaks of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He is now in the First Presidency, First Counselor. The name of the talk is Preparation for the Second Coming. So what you'll typically find in this LDS eschatological community, looking for the signs of the times, is you'll come across all sorts of really wild ideas based on what people claim are things that you have to really look for in the scriptures. You have to read things carefully. If you don't, then you're going to completely misunderstand that the 10 tribes, the 10 lost tribes, are coming in spaceships. New Jerusalem literally has to be built in Independence, Missouri. And the entire church has to be gathered there. The entire church, or at least all the righteous, have to be gathered there before Christ can come. And Missouri has to be wiped clean. And by the way, I've already covered all these things, so I'm not going to go over that here. You can just search my channel. We haven't seen the 144,000 called yet, and so that still has to happen. Which, by the way, if you look at my playlist, that process has already taken place. The selection of the 144,000, or at least it commenced at the time of Joseph Smith. and just many, many other things like, oh, these are all the things that we have to wait for before we can even begin to entertain that the second coming is even close. Well, that's not what President Oak said in this talk. Let me read just a few selections from this. The scriptures are rich in references to the second coming, an event eagerly awaited by the righteous and dreaded or denied by the wicked. Stop. Okay, so when you're looking at a person's motivation in what they say, their opinions about the second coming, I think that this is something that you may want to consider. Are you listening to somebody that is excited for the second coming? And of course, they need to stick to reality, but are they excited for the second coming, or does it seem like they want to push it off into the future? And you have to like think why. Now, I'm not saying that people that do that are wicked, but there could be a number of things going on. It could be a person that's very sincere and just based on their own reasoning, that's what they really think is going to happen. Others, I would say, may be scared of the second coming, whether they're wicked or whether it's just because they think it's going to be scary. Um, Others may not really even care. They don't care about truth. What they care about is having a following, being popular, whatever. And that's like their main motivation. So they've crafted like a series of beliefs that you can only really get through them because they're the expert, and then you'll understand the second coming. So there's different motivations, and who knows? Only the Lord knows the hearts of all people. But this is something to consider. The general fact that the second coming is eagerly awaited by the righteous and dreaded or denied by the wicked. And there's many other wicked reasons to do. There's some people that don't even have the second coming on their radar. They pretend like it's a fictitious thing, like it's not going to happen, and they're just like, well, no, because I've heard said before, well, I don't think that temples would have been announced at slash general conference if the second coming was going to happen. And that person clearly hasn't spent much time studying the millennium, because they would know that the main activity taking place in the millennium is temple work. There's going to be more temples. It would make sense that more temples are being announced right now before the millennium, you know? But that kind of attitude suggests that, well, I don't need to worry about it. I don't really know too much about it, but just like a lack of care, you know, about the subject. So, anyway, continuing. The faithful of all ages have pondered the sequence and meaning of the many events prophesied to precede and follow this hinge point of history. And there's that interesting phrase. We've done videos on that, specifically what President Nelson has said a couple of times about the dedication of the Rome, Italy temple, as well as the April 2020 General Conference. Four matters are indisputable to Latter-day Saints. One, the Savior will return to earth in power and great glory to reign personally during the millennium of righteousness and peace. Something, by the way, like I just said, I'm not so sure how many people in the church truly believe that. They treat church just like it's a club, a social club, or a good philosophy, but not literal, that Christ isn't literally going to come. Unfortunately, there's a handful of people that believe that way. Number two, at the time of his coming, there will be a destruction of the wicked and a resurrection of the righteous. Number three, no one knows the time of his coming. But number four, the faithful are taught to study the signs of it and to be prepared for it. I wish to speak about the fourth of these great things, or great realities. So what is that? Studying the signs and being prepared. The signs of the second coming and what we should do to prepare for it. Number one, or section one, the Lord has declared, quote, "He that feareth me shall be looking forth for the great day of the Lord to come, even for the signs of the coming of the Son of Man," end quote. The signs that will be shown, quote, "in the heavens above and in the earth beneath," end quote. This is one of the things I put on my spreadsheet called quotes, common misconceptions. And we're going to go over just a couple things on here. But one of the common misconceptions or things that people will say occasionally is this. We shouldn't watch for the signs of the second coming. We should focus only on the here and now. And I have a whole list of both scriptures and quotes from prophets including Joseph Smith himself, saying, nope, you are supposed to watch for the signs. In fact, here's a short one. Joseph Smith, we shall do well to discern the signs of the times as we pass along, that the day of the Lord may not overtake us as a thief in the night. Another one that I think is pretty incredible, kind of goes along with what we were saying earlier. Joseph Smith, I testify of these things, and that the coming of the Son of Man is nigh, even at your doors. If your souls and our bodies, if our souls and our bodies are not looking forth for the coming of the Son of Man, and after we are dead, if we are not looking forth, we shall be among those who are calling for the rocks to fall upon us. So it seems that a person's attitude toward the second coming could be a pretty big indicator of their spiritual preparation and where they are spiritually. If they're the type of person that is dreading judgment, you know, and the judgment that's coming, the main one, of course, is the burning of the wicked, the cleansing of the earth, which is all those who are living a telestial lifestyle right now. So anyway, let's go back to the talk. Okay, now this is interesting right here. Notice President Oak's list of signs of the times, things that have to happen. He says biblical and modern prophecies give many signs of the second coming. These include 1. The fullness of the gospel restored and preached in all the world for a witness to all nations. That goes along pretty well with what the email said. The only two things left, gathering Israel, and then Jesus comes. Number 2, false Christs and false prophets deceiving many. Note here that he doesn't say the one prophesied Antichrist that's going to sit in the temple of God in Jerusalem in the third temple. No, that's not a concept in our church. False Christs and false prophets, plural, deceiving many. Number 3, wars and rumors of wars with nation rising against nation. Number 4, earthquakes in diverse places. That's how this year started out, by the way, especially that one in Turkey that caused a literal splitting of amount of olives into two in Turkey. Number 5, famine and pestilence. Number 6, an overflowing scourge, a desolating sickness covering the land. Number 7, iniquity abounding. Number 8, the whole earth in commotion. Number 9, men's hearts failing them. So this is the list that he gives. Notice that it doesn't have uh, the return of the 10 tribes as a group coming in spaceships or coming out from under the hollow earth. It doesn't include the one person Antichrist. It doesn't include how we have to know that the 144,000 have been selected, 12,000 from each tribe, and all these other things. He doesn't mention the 7-year tribulation period and all that nonsense. All right, moving on. He says, these signs of the second coming are all around us. When is he saying this? April 2004. The signs of the second coming are all around us and seem to be increasing in frequency and intensity. Well, by my calculation, we're almost 20 years since this talk was given, and I think I can authoritatively say, and you can too, that things have just gotten worse since 2004 with all those things. So he goes on to say, for example, the list of major earthquakes in the World Almanac and Book of Facts 2004 shows twice as many earthquakes in the decades of the 1980s and 1990s as in the two preceding decades. It also shows further sharp increases in the first several years of this century. The list of notable floods and tidal waves and the list of hurricanes, typhoons, and blizzards worldwide shows similar increases in recent years. Increases by comparison with 50 years ago can be dismissed as changes in reporting criteria, but the accelerating pattern of natural disasters in the last few decades is ominous. And by the way, it's only increased since that time. Again, I have, for example, put together this, let me find it really quick, timeline wildfires. Zoom out. Okay, so ignore all these up here. All these are from 2022 because I was going to attempt to record each fire that was over 100,000 or had a death toll of at least one or buildings destroyed at least one. So all these right here, this is all 2022, this whole highlighted area right here. But in the years before that, all these ones that are highlighted in this bright red color, uh, these all represent countries, states, or provinces that have experienced their largest wildfire in country, province, or state history. The most recent of which is New Mexico. Canada may join this list very soon this year. That's what we read in an article, is that they think that there's potential that they may have their worst wildfire season of the nation's history. So we have New Mexico in 2022, uh, Russia and Colorado in 2021, California in 2020. Colorado again. Now there's the two types. Colorado had its most destructive in terms of buildings destroyed in 2021, but in 2020, the absolute largest. If I'm reading that right, let me just. Well, whatever. It's one of the two. I can't. Whatever. Okay. Um, Also in 2020, Washington, 2018, British Columbia and Nevada, 2012, Oregon, 2011, Arizona, 2007, Idaho, and Utah, 2006, Texas, and 2004, Alaska. So since the time of this talk, all that's happened, and there's been a whole lot more. This is just a small little indicator. Okay, section 2. Another sign of the times is the gathering of the faithful. So this is interesting that he sets this one apart. Like, first he gives this list of all these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But as he goes through the different aspects of studying the signs of the times and being prepared, under section 2, he gives that entire section of his talk to the gathering of the faithful. That's what President Nelson just said. Only two things left, uh, the gathering, and then after that, Christ coming. Okay, section 3. While we are powerless to alter the fact of the second coming and unable to know its exact time, we can accelerate our own preparation and try to influence the preparation of those around us. So, really, when it comes to the second coming, that's probably where we should put most of our priorities rather than here on YouTube, watching my channel or others. Although it's fine to do that, but it's infinitely more important to work on your own preparation. Um, Watch the way that you treat other people, become a Zion people, um, keeping the commandments, going to the temple, making sure you're on the covenant path, uh, doing missionary work. You know, on this channel, we do the Book of Mormon sharing challenge or the Flood the Earth challenge. That's a great way to do that. So that's kind of like probably the more important thing to do, in addition to knowing the signs of the times and just watching. But that's probably going to do a lot more good for you if you're actually prepared for the second coming personally. Section 4, brothers and sisters, as the Book of Mormon teaches, this life is the time for men to prepare to meet God. The day of this life is the day for men to perform their labors. And then he asks, are we preparing? So, personal preparation. We will be meeting our God in the flesh when he actually comes here. Okay, section 5, we are living in the prophesied time. Look at this. We are living in the prophesied time, when peace shall be taken from the earth, when all things shall be in commotion, and men's hearts shall fail them. If you're waiting for those things to happen, don't. It's already taken place, and it's just getting worse. There are many temporal causes of commotion, including wars and natural disasters, but even greater cause of current commotion is spiritual. Later in this same section, he says, and this is perfect given what happened at the White House recently and other places, evil that used to be localized and covered like a boil is now legalized and paraded like a banner. The most fundamental roots and bulwarks of civilization are questioned or attacked. Nations disavow their religious heritage. Marriage and family responsibilities are discarded as impediments to personal indulgence. That means people being concerned more with making money and going on trips and vacations and buying toys for themselves instead of having a family. The movies and magazines and television that shape our attitudes are filled with stories or images that portray the children of God as predatory beasts, or at best, trivial creations pursuing little more than personal pleasure. Yeah. the misconstruing of humanity and our role on this earth and in eternity. That either, you know what, humanity's really bad. We need to have less people, actually. You should have less children because we're just destroying this world and the planet, and we're just really bad. Um, and all that really matters, we're just monkeys anyway, so you might as well just have a good time. Okay, and too many of us accept this as entertainment, he says. Okay, later, same section, he says, we are surrounded by challenges on all sides, but with faith in God, we must trust the blessings he has promised those who keep his commandments. We have faith in the future. Ah, look, faith in the future instead of fear. We have faith in the future, and we are preparing for that future. To borrow a metaphor from the familiar world of athletic competitions, we do not know when this game will end, and we do not know the final score, but we do know that when the game finally ends, our team wins. And this is another thing I see commonly in this community. Not with everybody, obviously, but there's a fair portion that seems to be just obsessed with being afraid, obsessed with what the adversary can do, obsessed with secret combinations and their power, which I keep trying to remind everybody, if they were so powerful, uh, they wouldn't have to work in secret and they wouldn't be striving and doing all these things. In other words, they would just be able to do it. For one, yes, they're doing horrible things, but guess what? The Lord wins. The Lord wins at the second coming. That's the whole point. That's something to look forward to. So stop acting like they're so powerful and things are so dreadful and there's just no hope and you have to rely on yourself uh, to thwart their plans or to keep yourself safe. No. Ha- have appropriate preparations, 72-hour kit, food storage, just do things like that. Don't go overboard. And certainly don't give them more power in your mind than what they actually have. And certainly don't despair that they're going to win. That's like the sense that I get from some people, is that they don't really think the second coming is going to happen, even though they're studying the second coming all the time. It's almost like they think that no, really, Satan's going to win and all this stuff. It's crazy. All right, moving on. Oh, that's it. Okay, so it's not that complicated. It really is not. Be prepared and look for all these different types of things. And notice the list that Elder Oaks gives, a list of 9 things. And of course, there's more. But to think that in order to like really understand it, you have to I've noticed that when people say, like when they're trying to make a point, uh, like they're trying to contrive something from the scriptures, they're trying to point to what they think is an allusion to something else. When they try and infer something from a passage of scripture, they'll usually use the term, well, if you read this carefully, or you have to pay attention to this. Usually, what that really means is you need to look at that scripture the same way that they do, because they're trying to create this. Um, I've likened it to Star Wars, how there was the original trilogy, and before we had the prequels, before we had the sequel trilogy, before we had all these different things, when all we had was the original 3, people loved it so much that they came up with their own fan fiction. And there was an entire body of work called the Expanded Universe that included books and games and comics and stuff that fans had made. And George Lucas was like, yeah, you can make that canon. That's cool. And now it's not, by the way, because Disney purchased Star Wars. But anyway, I feel like that's something that kind of goes on, that uh, there's people that are pushing the gospel or the second coming expanded universe, like making up more things than what is actually there, based on very little things, and what they call the need to really carefully read this, because if you don't, you miss this entire big concept that no one talks about in general conference or anywhere else in the church. So it's not that complicated. It really is not. And the other thing about it, this is what I'm going to close on. Uh, well, wait, before I do that, just a reminder. Here's my phrase tracker. This is where I've gone through all General Conference talks going back to 1942, taking a tally of all the times that these words and phrases at the top here have been used in General Conference. And the phrase, "hour is not yet," hasn't been used since, of all years, 2004. That was the last General Conference that term was used. The hour is not yet. And then the times of the Gentiles, something that's another one of the things that people think still hasn't happened yet. It's going to be like this event that happens and we're going to know it, which is contrary to everything that we've studied. The last time that was used was 1977. Haven't seen that in a very, very long time. And you go to many, many other things here. I would encourage you to spend some time on this spreadsheet. It's called Timeline Phrase, and the link for it is in the description below for these spreadsheets. Take some time and look at what our current prophets and apostles and general authorities and general officers of the church actually talk about uh, uh, currently, and you'll see some definite trends. Let me just highlight, for example, if I can find it, Second Coming. You see this big dark block right here that starts in 2018 and goes until 2021. That's basically since President Nelson became prophet up until 2021. There was a heavy emphasis on the Second Coming, the likes of which you don't see uh, really at any other time, except for 9 times in 1958 for some reason, and then kind of a higher concentration and frequency in the 70s, which is usually the case. But by far, the most that the Second Coming has been talked about has started with President Nelson's when he became president. Big, dark red block. This year, we're already up to 4. We'll have to see what October brings. But yeah, it seems like there's a heavy emphasis on the Second Coming right now. And there's more. I'm not going to go over this. I have a separate playlist for this. Now, the last thing that I wanted to share, let me go to quotes A through, no, it's under common misconceptions, Control F, obvious. I find that some of the same, that same attitude of like coming up with like these things that you never hear in church, part of the gospel expanded universe. That same group also tend to think in this kind of way. The signs of the times will be very obvious, just very, very obvious. Like, in other words, there's not a way that you can miss it because, for example, the 10 lost tribes are going to come in spaceships, or everyone is going to know when the 144,000 are performing their mission. Everybody's going to know that we have 3.5 years left because there's going to be a raging war in Israel. Everyone's going to know because we are all physically in Jackson County, Missouri, because we've been gathered there. So it's going to be obvious according to these other schools of thought. But let's take a look and see what prophets and apostles have said. And there's 3 quotes. The first one is pretty long. I'm not going to read. Dang. I'm not going to read all this. Dang, it's long. I've done it before. Let me start with Joseph Fielding Smith. This is in General Conference 1966. The words of the prophets are rapidly being fulfilled. In 1966, but it is done on such natural principles that most of us fail to see it. Joel promised that the Lord would pour out his spirit upon all flesh. The sons and daughters would prophesy. Old men should dream dreams, and young men should see visions. By the way, President Hinckley said that was fulfilled October of 2001, a month after 9/11. Joseph Fielding Smith continues, yet the old world goes on about its business, paying very little heed to all the Lord has said and to all the signs and indications that have been given. As of 1966, men harden their hearts and say that Christ delayeth his coming until the end of the earth. They are, quote, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, according to the customs of the world, not of God, without one thought that the end of wickedness is near. Pleasure and the love of the world have captured the hearts of the people. There is no time for such people to worship worship the Lord, or give heed to his warnings. So it will continue until the day of destruction is upon them. They're gonna Life is gonna continue as normal. People are gonna be caught off guard. If these huge things, the way that they're portrayed by some people, are gonna happen, I don't think that people would be caught off guard. I don't. It would be too obvious. He said that Christ has said to watch so that you're not taken as a thief. Well, you wouldn't be taken as a thief in the night if it's all obvious. You can point and be like, okay, we're super close because New Jerusalem, it's been constructed, and now we have the 24 temple complex, and the entire church is gathered there. I don't think that there's really any opportunity in that scenario to be taken as a thief in the night. And by the way, I've already addressed all these different things that I'm bringing up. Some of them I have playlists for, so I'm not going to go over all the minutia and all the evidence. Uh, just go watch those playlists. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Hugh B. Brown, first counselor in the first presidency, 1967. Just a year after he said that, after Joseph Fielding Smith said that, he says, I want to say to you, brethren, that in the midst of all the troubles, the uncertainties, the tumult and chaos through which the world is passing, almost unnoticed by the majority of people of the world, there's been set up a kingdom over which God the Father presides, and Jesus the Christ is the King. That kingdom is rolling forward, as I say, partly unnoticed. But it is rolling forward with a power and a force that will stop the enemy in its tracks while some of you live. And of course, that's referring to when the world is cleansed of wickedness. That's when the enemy is going to be stopped in its tracks. Now, to finish it off, let me just read a little bit from George Q. Cannon. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, his entire talk or discourse is essentially about this topic. But let me just read some of these highlighted areas, and there is a lot. George Q. Cannon at this time was in the Quorum of the 12, but later became a member of the First Presidency. He says, I will read a portion of a revelation given through the prophet Joseph Smith previous to the organization of the church, dated April 1829. Quote, Oliver Cowdery, verily, verily, I say unto you that assuredly as the Lord liveth, who is your God and your Redeemer, even so surely shall you receive a knowledge of whatsoever things ye shall ask in faith, with an honest heart, believing that ye shall receive a knowledge concerning the engravings of the old records which are ancient, which contain those parts of my scripture of which has been spoken by the manifestation of my spirit. Yea, behold, I will tell you in your mind and in your heart by the Holy Ghost, which will come upon you, and which shall dwell in your heart. Now, behold, this is the spirit of revelation. Behold, this is the spirit by which Moses brought the children of Israel through the Red Sea on dry ground. Okay? In your mind and in your heart. That's the spirit through which Moses brought the children of Israel through the Red Sea. There's people that like to really spectacularize that event. And no one really knows because we weren't there. All we know is that the Red Sea was parted, but I think there's different conceptions of how that happened. And some think of it as really, really miraculous, just incredible. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe it looked a little bit more on the natural side, which doesn't take away from the fact that God performed a miracle. But God, he works through the laws that he has instituted. He works through the laws of physics. Surely there's higher physics and there's higher laws, but he likes to, if you haven't noticed, he likes to do things as practically as possible. You know, all right, continuing. The point I wish to call your attention to is contained in the second and third verse of this revelation. The Latter-day Saints are in many respects like other people who are not Latter-day Saints. Okay, look at this. We are apt to entertain views which are not very correct, and which may be the result of our traditions and preconceived ideas. This is a peculiarity that pertains to mankind generally, that whenever they deal with the things of God or speak about them or contemplate them, and especially when they read the predictions made by the servants of God concerning future events or events that may transpire right before their eyes, they are apt to get, sometimes, erroneous ideas or at least exaggerated ideas in relation to them. digest that. Okay, exaggerated ideas. Let's continue. Let's move on down. Okay, even with this experience in the past, the Latter-day Saints themselves are not entirely divested of extravagant views respecting the effects which are likely to follow the fulfillment of predictions yet in the future. Are we not all inclined to look forward to many events which have been predicted by the servants of God as being of so great and wonderful, and may I say so supernatural a character, that when they shall be fulfilled, they will even startle us who believe they are coming, and will compel, that means to force, and will force the unbelieving inhabitants of the earth to accept them as evidences of the truth? That's the wrong answer. And that's not how the Lord works. He doesn't compel people to believe. Um, there's kind of like another um, maybe motivation there for some people. For they want for people to be proven wrong. There's like a desire for potentially revenge or a desire for vindication, like people being like, oh, you believe in the second coming, but that's not going to happen, or whatever. And so you envision like these spectacular things, and you imagine what the look is going to look like on your enemy's face, the one who was making fun of you. Oh, you're not going to be laughing now when the 10 lost tribes are coming from outer space or whatever, right? There's some that are probably under that influence. Let's continue. I would not say one word to weaken your proper expectations, but my experience has taught me that the Lord works in the midst of this people by natural means, that the greatest events that have been spoken of by the holy prophets will come along so naturally as the consequence of certain causes that, that unless our eyes are enlightened by the Spirit of God and the Spirit of revelation rests us, we will fail to see that these are the events predicted by the holy prophets. And I've received pushback when I've presented this by President Hinckley a month after 9/11. Let's go to General Conference. Let's go all the way back to October 2001. It's his very first talk. Again, 9/11 had just happened, just immediately before this. Okay, September, October. 1 month later, we have General Conference. The first thing that President Hinckley says in a talk called "Living in the Fulness of Times" is he says this. Let me zoom in. The vision of Joel has been fulfilled. Let me highlight that. Oh, it's already highlighted. It just kicked in. There. The vision of Joel has been fulfilled, wherein he declared, and it shall come to pass that, and he's not just saying that it's fulfilled, he's quoting it to you so that you remember what the prophecy is. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. And I will shew wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness. So he didn't just like stop right here with blood, fire, and pillars of smoke, because that is obvious imagery of 9/11. But he goes on, he includes the entire thing. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And by the way, there's many times that this happens. It happens sometimes with wildfires. It happens with eclipses, right? These are times when the sun is turned into darkness and the moon into blood. So I think there's some people that expect like all of a sudden for the sun to like shut off, or I don't know, some big thing to completely block out the sun or whatever. But like I said, there's been an increase of the moon being turned to blood from the smoke that rises from these fires, for example. and the sun being darkened, like what happened in New York City. There was so much smoke from Canada that they couldn't see the sun rise. It was darkened. Um, go back. Okay, so the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, and the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. That last part sounds like gathering, doesn't it? And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. That's what happens when you join the church. For in when you live righteously. For in Mount Zion in Jerusalem, that's a reference to the church, the stakes of Zion. It's a reference to temples. It's just a reference to being uh, having joined the church and getting on the covenant path. So in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord shall call. Okay, so um, there are people that are like, no, that actually argue against President Hinckley that has not been fulfilled, even though he flat out said it being a prophet of God. There's people that, in their own wisdom, their own understanding, their pseudo prophet status, I guess, because it seems to me like some people think that they are essentially their own private prophet, or they know the real, what's happening. That will say, no, that hasn't been fulfilled. I suppose that they would actually argue with President Hinckley and be like, well, you don't really understand that chapter. What's supposed to happen is the sun is supposed to go completely black and da 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 da, whatever their reasoning is. And so those people, when a prophet is flat out telling you that something's been fulfilled, are missing the fact that it's been fulfilled. And it's because it happens naturally. What does George Buchanan say? He says, the Lord works in the midst of this people by natural means, in that the greatest events that have been spoken by the holy prophets will come along so naturally as the consequence of certain causes, for example, 9/11, that unless our eyes are enlightened by the Spirit of God and the Spirit of revelation rests us, we will fail to see that these are the events predicted by the holy prophets. And by the way, what's interesting about that is that 9/11, I would say, is probably on the more spectacular side. That was something that was definitely dramatic, spectacular, um, big. It affected the entire world, and yet people still miss what happened. When, in plain English, in general conference, a message to the entire church, a message to the entire world, a prophet says, oh, this has been fulfilled, and then we still miss it. And then he says, I refer you again to the prophecy of Isaiah and Micah respecting the gathering together of Israel of God from the various nations of Zion. Here we go. It's almost as though the gathering is one of the biggest things. And like President Nelson said, it's the most important work taking place on the earth today. As we read of that in the Bible, we might think when that was fulfilled, it would be done in such a supernatural, with such supernatural manifestations that the people would be constrained or forced to acknowledge it was the work of God. There we go again with the supernatural, spectacular, dramatic, um, gospel expanded universe, right? Later, he says, because it has come along so naturally, and okay, wait, okay, I better read the whole thing. Yet we see it every day. Our people are gathering, and men and women who emigrate bear testimony to the friends they leave behind in almost the exact language that the prophets said they would, and yet it is not thought very extraordinary. Why is this? Because it has come along so naturally, and so with great events that will take place in the future, like 9/11, and um, tsunamis and earthquakes and fires and all this stuff that's happening. They will come along in so natural a manner that the Lord will bring them to pass in such a way that they will not be accepted by the people except by those who can comprehend the truth as the fulfillment of the predictions of the prophets. It requires the Spirit of God to enable men and women to understand the things of God. It requires the Spirit of God to enable the people to comprehend the work of God and to perceive his movements and providences among the children of men. The man who is destitute of the Spirit of God cannot comprehend the work of God. A woman whose mind has not been enlightened by the Spirit cannot see or comprehend any of these things, any of these events that take place in fulfillment of the prophecies of the holy prophets. I'm going to end there. You get the idea. So when Dan Dibble says that Elder Treadway of the 70s said that President Nelson said that there are only two things left that need to happen before the second coming, the gathering of Israel and Jesus comes, you might see why I think I give him, I think that he actually said that. I don't doubt Dan Dibble's reporting of what Elder Treadway said. Because for me, it falls in line with everything that we've studied so far and everything that has been said openly and plainly, instead of searching for mysterious things in the scriptures that have to be read in a very, very special way to understand this big concept. It's just said plainly over pulpits, in general conference, in stake conferences, special visits from general authorities. It's said plainly. And that's what we should listen to. Okay. It's fun to do all the other things. It's fun to imagine really exciting things like a movie's going to play out and, oh my gosh, we're going to have spaceships now and we're going to have super missionaries in the 144,000 that are just going to be like, everything's going to be so amazing, so spectacular. I know that that's fun. And I speculate on certain things too, but I certainly don't preach them or teach them or ask you to believe it. That's why I stick heavily to what the prophets and apostles say in the scriptures. And that's where we should get our primary information from when it comes to the second coming. Otherwise, we're starting to branch off. If we start to really entertain those ideas, and we start to teach them as truth, we start to branch off and become a separate religion, a separate religion cult, essentially. This is how schisms happen, is when you start to go off on these strange paths. And again, there's nothing wrong with trying to understand things and being like, oh, I think that it's like this. Yeah, I think it's like this. But when you start to preach it, that it is true, that's when problems start to seep in. And so this is exciting. And by the way, Elder Treadway, I should have brought this up at the beginning. His name is Gordon L. Treadway. He's in Area 70, and he's in the 11th Quorum of the 70. And his area is North America West, it seems. North America West. So this is who is being reported as having quoted President Nelson as saying that there's only two things left. Okay, yeah, so that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.